Hey, welcome back. I don't know if you've ever had one of those days like I've had that's lasted about a week. This is my fourth try to make this video, and it's been 27 or so takes thus far, and I just can't seem to spit the words out. I don't know about you, but for me, that's embarrassing. But let's get to work. Today's video is about the .308 Winchester hunting rifle and the load development for that rifle. Now, before we start on the load development for this rifle, I want to point to a truth in the world, right here. Your rifle can't shoot any better than you can. That means that your technique at the bench or on the ground or however you're holding the rifle is going to be a limiting factor for the performance of the rifle. If you aren't capable of shooting small groups, neither is your rifle when you're shooting it. With that in mind, this is a rifle that I don't shoot much, and I had to bring my skills up just a little bit to get this done. So we're going to do load development today for a hunting round. This is for hunting big game, deer or elk. The .308, in my opinion, is a little light for elk, but will work just fine at limited ranges. Now, in the process of getting ready for this video, a friend of mine challenged me to do this load development the way a hunter would, without all the fancy equipment that I use to do F-open rifles. And I thought that was a great idea. So that's what we're going to do. No chronograph, no quick load, really no technology with the exception of a ballistics calculator. The reason we need a ballistics calculator is we're going to verify our elevation, our dope, at longer ranges to make sure that we understand how the bullet performs over range because we don't have a chronograph. With no chronograph, we're going to have to do something so we have dope for longer range shots. It'd be a shame to have a trophy animal, for instance, out there in sight within range and you miss because you don't know what your drop is, in real world terms, from your rifle. I'd recommend this procedure even if you are shooting factory ammunition. You need to know your exact drop at distance, if at all possible. And that means shooting your rifle to develop that prior experience. I know everybody wants to say prior engagements. Personally, I don't get into firefights with deer and elk. For me, it's experience. That's just the way I roll. So I'm going to give you the hint here that you need to shoot your rifle at any distance you intend to shoot at game animals, or at a longer distance so you can develop a trajectory model for your rifle with your load. All right, let's get to work. That same friend that challenged me to shoot this way was kind enough to provide me with 168 grain Barnes TSX bullets. Thank you so much. My friend asked not to be named, so I'm keeping his name out of it. Incredibly kind of you, and I appreciate it so much, the support that you're giving to the channel and to the work that I'm doing. So let me give you a little background. I have never fired a Barnes bullet before. I have never shot a copper solid before, so this is my first time through, and I'm going to give you some of the things that I've learned along the way. At this point, I've already shot all the tests. I have all the data. I'm just presenting it to you. Let's get on to the rifle. All right, had to change the board so I could give you the specs for the load because I don't want to have to say all that. Look, it's a .308 Win. It's a semi-custom rifle on a 700 Remington with a Hart 1 in 12 barrel. It's a pencil barrel, a thin barrel. So we're going to have to treat it appropriately and keep that temperature down. It is chambered with the notorious M852 reamer, which is extremely accurate with 168 grain Sierra Match King bullet. And since the ogive of the Barnes bullet looks very much like the Match King, this should work pretty well. We're using Federal 210M primers and AR comp powder in PPU brass. I bought this brand new for this test, and well, it's small inside. Do be careful when you reload .308 because various brands have various different internal capacities, and those differences in internal capacity can lead to excessive pressures, especially when you're using load data for one of the larger types of brass like Winchester. Now, I'm going to be using the Barnes load data right off of their website, but I noted that that data was generated with Winchester brass, which is much bigger inside than the PPU, so I'm going to be exceedingly careful because I'm pretty sure I'm going to pressure out quite a bit early compared to the data in that manual. Our first load is 37.6 grains of powder. And it's shot like this. Kind of ugly, flattish, but wide. and I don't think that was me. So I pushed it right up to 37.9 because I had no pressure signs, and I got, well, the first round was not seated all the way into the case, so I couldn't chamber it and had to struggle a little bit to get it back out of the chamber because the bullet had grabbed onto the lands, which would be expected with any bullet. So once I was out, I fired 2 shots of 37.9 and got this very wide. I'm going to use air quotes here, group. I mean, the 3-shot groups aren't really groups per se from a statistical perspective. They're just indicators as to how the rifle shoots. At 38.2, it started to group. Now, this is only 3 shots, so once again, not statistically significant. We're at the ragged edge of having an indication here. I know people out there want to throw statistics up, but this is a thin-barreled rifle, and heat is a confounding factor that you have to deal with while you're trying to shoot groups. You could spend all week trying to shoot groups, and, well, the weather conditions then become a confounder, so it doesn't work, right? You're going to have to shoot the group and do the best you can with what you find. This 38.2 grain group is just over 200 thousandths. It's like 202 center to center. I don't have any pressure signs, so I'm moving up. 38.5 grains, I get this group. Now, this group is 220 thousandths, and you'll note that the point of impact has shifted up, mostly, and to the right slightly. Here, let me show you. Now, 2 good groups adjacent to each other, but the point of impact isn't stable. We'll get to that in just a moment. Let's keep going. 38.8 grains. I get this group. Now, this group is really good. This is only about 199 thousandths. It's almost the same size as the 38.2 group. But once again, it has moved up even more. This is not something that we accept in our match rifles. And we're going to have to discuss it. Let me continue on. Now, at 38.8, I had 1 click at the top of bolt lift. Uh-oh. You hear that, guys? That was a click at the top of bolt lift. And that is a pressure sign. It's not a severe one. I didn't have an ejector swipe. I didn't have a flattened primer, and I didn't have any cratering. I also didn't have an excessively large head when I measured it. So we're not overpressure, but it's starting to tell me that it's wanting to stop soon. I went to 39.1, and I got 1 click at 39.1 and this enormous triangle between the bullet holes. Now, we're coming out of the node into the scatter node area, and we're getting close to max pressure. But I wanted to see where max was for this brass with this powder. Now, mind you, the Barnes data, if you go look it up online, is a little over 40 grains of powder. So I had a lot of loads there that I had just in case I needed them, in case the powder was slower than expected or something like that. And I started at 39.4. Both the first and second shot created clicks at the top of bolt lift, and that was enough for me. It's time to stop, close the ammo box, and take it home. So back home, I analyzed my target, made some determinations as to where to go, and reloaded the rounds that were overloaded. Put a new powder charge of 38.3 in each and every case, and seated the bullets again to the same depth. I haven't mentioned the seating depth yet, because I had intended to do a seating depth test, and I was going to mention it in that part of the video. In this case, I started at maximum magazine length, which is 2.810 inches overall length. Fortunately for me, it shot at that length, so there's no need to do a seating depth test. We can just skip it in this case. If you need to know how to do a seating depth test, I've got videos on YouTube that you can watch. It's done the same way regardless of what you're doing, it's just your starting point. In this case, we start at maximum mag length and we go shorter and shorter until we find something that works. So I took the same setup for that Caldwell bag to the 600-yard line and fired a 3-shot group. This 3-shot group is on a shot marker target, so we can look at the velocity on the target. But I didn't while I was doing this because, like I said, the challenge was no chronograph. And I took that seriously. Let's not cheat ourselves. But now that we've got this group of significantly less than a minute of angle at 600 yards with a relatively low BC bullet, these are not super high BC bullets. The G7's around 200 and an unknown velocity. So you're probably asking yourself, how many sighters did Keith have to shoot to get on target? Would you believe that I used Streetlock Pro, guessed at the velocity, and dialed right to it? Let me explain how I did this before anybody gets excited. If you look in the Barnes manual, Barnes says that their maximum achieved safe velocity was 2,684 feet per second. Now, the load that I'm shooting is right up against the initial pressure sign. So what do you think the velocity is likely to be? Well, I'm thinking it's at least 2,650, if not a little more. So I put 2,650 into Streetlock and used that. I calculated a dial-up of 17.3 minutes of angle. So I just dialed that on. I also dialed on half a minute of left windage because, well, left is that way to you. We have to deal with spin drift and Coriolis effect. With 17 minutes of up elevation, we're going to get some spin drift. And we're definitely going to have some hang time, so we're going to get a little more Coriolis effect than you would with a high-speed super missile shooting out of an F-open rifle. So we're going to add a little bit compared to what I would for my F-open rifle. Be that as it may, I never had to touch it again. First shot was on, second shot was on, we're done. Notice the first shot's low and then the second and third land on each other. That's the barrel warming up. Okay, that's just the way it is. Now remember, the purpose of the rifle, in my mind, is to shoot an animal, get it on the ground, and turn it into dinner. That's the only reason for the rifle. It's not there to shoot tiny little groups at long range. It's not there to bang on steel out at 1,200 yards or anything silly like that. It's there for hunting game animals to obtain food. That's why I have it. You may have different purposes for your rifles, but I'm going to load develop for that intended use case. Thinking of that use case, let's talk about terminal performance for just a moment in hunting ethics. I've been bumbling over this for days trying to get this across to you, and I really want this to come through clean. Barnes advises customers that there is a minimum impact velocity to get good expansion from the bullet. I have not called Barnes. I haven't asked them. But I've seen numbers online, which is probably a mistake, but for the sake of argument, the estimates that people put online range from 1,800 to 2,000 feet per second at impact to get good, solid expansion out of any of the Barnes bullets. If I say that I'm not going to shoot an animal with an impact velocity below 1,800 feet per second, I can use my ballistics calculator to determine what range that is. At sea level, standard day, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the weather that we have out here in the Pacific Northwest nearly daily, even in the middle of summer. Yeah, that situation. I don't want to shoot an animal past about 425 yards. Testing at 600 yards guarantees that I have the accuracy I'm going to need at 425 yards, and I don't have to do any more testing, and I also have the start of a trajectory that I can use to calculate everything out. In the end, load development for a hunting rifle is not as difficult as it is for a match rifle. It's a very quick and easy process as long as you can drive the rifle. Remember I said I'd never used Barnes bullets before? Well, I have a couple of comments on the bullets. Number one, these are match grade. I mean, they shoot as well as any match bullet I've ever had, and far better than most of the hunting bullets I've ever tried. Now, there are a few exceptions of match grade hunting bullets. I can think of a particular manufacturer that I use for match bullets. If you don't know what that is, go watch some of the other videos. Now, this is not sponsored content, by the way. Barnes didn't pay me for any of this, just so you know. A friend gave me this. They're match quality. As far as their precision, I have not tried their terminal ballistics yet. We'll get to that, but there's plenty of opportunities on YouTube to go find people shooting gel blocks with them. That's as good as it's going to get. You can just do a search to find that. I don't need to replicate that. The other thing that I was worried about, being a solid copper bullet and being a softer copper than what you would find in the jacket of a jacketed bullet, so it can obturate correctly into the bore, I expected some excessive copper fouling in the barrel. Well, shockingly, the copper fouling was less than I get from jacketed bullets in this particular rifle. I don't understand it. Maybe it's the grooves cut in the bearing surface. Who knows? I don't care because the rifle stays clean, the rifle shoots good, and you know what? It's a very simple load to achieve in this rifle. Does this technique translate to other cartridges and other rifles? Of course it does. If you remember the simple truth that I gave you at the beginning, your rifle can't shoot better than you can. That's all I have for this one. Until next time, get some practice, shoot that rifle some, and really get good at driving it. And I'll see you in the next video.